If you haven't been with us in a few weeks, we're in a brand new series called the Scarlet Thread. And we're doing this for a couple different reasons. But what we're doing is we're taking different stories throughout the Bible and demonstrating how they point to Jesus. Now, today, we're going to talk about a big boat that had a bunch of animals on it. Now, just a quick question, and if you don't know the answer, that's okay. How many animals of each kind, how many of each kind of animal did Moses bring on the ark? Anyone? 10? 10? 0? 2? Oh, that's good. That's good, Layla. See, one of the reasons we're doing these stories is because sometimes we don't know the stories, and that's okay. If you don't know the stories in the Bible, that's okay. You just never learned them. You're learning them for the first time. It wasn't Moses that brought animals on the ark. It was Noah. It was Noah. He brought a bunch of different animals on the ark. See, it was a trick question. I know, that was rude. But the second reason that we're doing this is because Jesus thought that it was important that his disciples know that all of Scripture points to him. In fact, he thought it was so important that when he rose from the grave, he took time to explain all of the Scriptures to his disciples and show how they pointed to him. So when, you get into the Old Testament or you get into scary territory like the minor prophets, and you're like, oh no, your name is so strange, I don't even know if I should read your book. Like all of that points to Jesus. And you can find Jesus throughout it. But today we're going to talk about Noah and the ark. And we're reading from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And the reason we're doing this, although it's not a word-for-word translation like the ESV or the NASB, the ESV which we normally use around here, which we'll also use today, the reason we're using this is because it does such a great job of accurately presenting not just the story, but the heart of God and the way that it points to Jesus. So if you don't have a Jesus Storybook Bible, they're really good. Layla, I see you brought yours today. That is amazing. Way to go. If you have one and you want to bring it, you're welcome to read along. But we're going to be in the story of Noah, and it's entitled A New Beginning. So if you want to turn with us and you want to read, you're welcome to. But we did a little bit better this week. We have the words on the screen with pictures from the Bible this time, right? So that's good. So you can, if you get bored of listening to me read, you can just look at the pictures. So here we go. It starts out like this. It says, time passed. Right, we started with Adam and Eve, and like all these things were kind of starting to go wrong and unravel. It said time passed, and many people filled the earth. Right, it wasn't just Adam and Eve. Now there's lots of people. Lots of people were all over the earth. It says everyone everywhere had forgotten about God and were only doing bad things all the time. Now, I just want to look at the ESV and see how it reads this verse. It says this, it says, the Lord saw that the wickedness of humanity was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Like that's how bad things had gotten. 10 generations had passed since Adam and Eve, and now evil had gotten to the point that it had just corrupted every intention of the thoughts of the heart of humanity. Every intention of the thought and of the hearts of humanity was evil continually. So the picture is kind of bleak about what's going on right here. So I wonder what God's going to do. It says this, it says, God's heart was filled with pain when he saw what had happened to the world he had loved. Everywhere was disease and death and destruction, all the things God hates most. And we looked at a lot of those things last week about what had begun to transpire because we had rebelled against God, because we had chosen to sinfully do what God had said not to do, what was not good, what was not beautiful, what was not beneficial. It says, now Noah was God's friend, which was odd in those days because no one else was. Noah listened to God. He talked to God. He just loved being with God, like you do with your best friend. Who's got a best friend? You got a best friend? Don't you enjoy being with your best friend, talking to them and hanging out and playing with them? Like Noah had this neat relationship with God. So God spoke to him. Noah, God said, things have gone wrong. People have filled my world with hate instead of love. They're destroying themselves and each other and my world. I must stop them. First, we'll build an ark. Do you know how to build an ark? That's okay, neither did Noah. But God knew, and he would show him. A storm is coming, God told Noah, but I will rescue you. I promise. And last week we talked about this. Does God always keep his promises? Yes, always. I promise. I'll send the animals to you. Ones that creep and crawl and slither and slime and gallop and hop and bound and climb. And don't forget to pack everyone's food. The storm is going to wash away all of the hate and all of the sadness and everything that had gone wrong and make the world clean again. God had thought up a way to keep Noah safe, but Noah would have to trust God and do exactly what God told him. So Noah built an ark, which basically means a really large boat. Noah's neighbors came out to watch and point and laugh because they didn't believe Noah about the boat or the storm or needing to be rescued. And Noah must have looked rather silly. His boat was in the desert, and the desert was nowhere near the sea, and there wasn't even a cloud in the sky. Why would anyone need an umbrella, let alone a boat? Can you imagine? No, I think it took him like 100 years to build this gigantic, enormous boat, and no one had ever seen a flood like this before, and all the ridicule he must have gotten, all the splinters he must have gotten, building that ark out of gopher wood. But Noah didn't mind so much what other people thought. He minded what God thought, and so he did just what God told him to do. When the ark was ready, God said, "All aboard!" And Noah's family and all the animals climbed inside. Then God shut the door, and it started raining for minutes that joined up into hours, that joined up into days, that joined up into weeks and weeks. And the rain joined up into puddles, that joined up into rivers, that joined up into lakes, that joined up into a flood that covered the whole world. Their boat had once seemed so big, suddenly seemed very small. But in the middle of the huge storm and the crashing waves and all the thunder and the lightning through it all, God was with them. And God kept them safe for 40 long days and 40 long nights. Finally, the rain stopped and the sun came out, and Noah threw open all the windows. "Hooray," everyone shouted. Now, have you ever been a part of a time where it rained a whole lot? About a year ago, the Mississippi was flooding. It was breaking all kind of flood records because we had so much rain. And I'm guessing all the farmers that wanted some rain and then got more rain were kind of saying, "Hey, okay, enough rain, right? It's time to stop. We need to keep planting, and we can't really do this." Have you ever been in a time when you had so much rain, you're kind of like, "Okay, I'm kind of sick of rain. I want the sun to come out." Imagine if it rained straight for 40 days and 40 nights and never stopped. There were only ever clouds. You didn't see the sun come out. It was basically like the winter here. You know what I'm talking about? And then all of a sudden, the sun comes out. How excited would you be? That's what they were like on this boat. Noah sent his dove out to explore, and it wasn't long before she brought him back a fresh olive leaf. And everyone knew exactly what that meant. She had found a tree and land. The water was going down. At last, the boat landed quite suddenly on top of a great mountain. As soon as it was safe, God said, "Out you come." And so they did. Everyone skipping and dancing onto dry land. And the first thing that Noah did was to thank God for rescuing them, just as he had promised, because God always keeps his promises. And the first thing God did was to make another promise. "I won't ever destroy the world again." And there in the clouds, just where the storm meets the sun, was a beautiful bow made of light. And what do we call that bow? A rainbow. Yeah. There was this rainbow. It was a sign from God to show that he would never destroy the earth again with a flood. Now, I tell you what, this story is really a beautiful story, and I'm so thankful as I got to get back into this story and think through it, pray through it, and study it. This story really demonstrates the beautiful character of God. But I think oftentimes when we just do a cursory reading, we just kind of read it and we read it out of context, we miss a lot of what's going on. In fact, we misunderstand God. Have you ever been misunderstood before? Has ever said something and like you said something that you thought was a good thing and then someone heard it in a different way and they thought it was a bad thing? Have you ever been in that situation? If you're married, you can raise your hand. That's probably happened a number of times. And it's hard to be misunderstood. And can you imagine? God gets misunderstood all the time. And I want to show you an example, a visual example of how one of the ways that we really misunderstand God. And we're going to use the book Zoom. I don't know if you've ever used the book Zoom before, but if you had, don't spoil it. It's by Istvan Banye. And I want to look at this first picture. Now, this first picture, it has some people in it, has some characters in it, and I want to know, what is this story about? If you had to guess, what's this story about? What do you think? The chicken? And what kind of chicken? Is it a boy chicken or girl chicken? It's a rooster, which is what kind of chicken? A boy chicken. So probably this story is about a boy chicken, right? And then there's these, two people. Do they seem older or younger? They seem younger. Where are they at? Do we know where this is taking place? Maybe a farm. It's hard to tell. I mean, there's a fence there, and we don't even know. Maybe that rooster is on their land. Maybe it's on their neighbor's land. It's hard to tell. Let's look at the second picture. Second picture may help us. Okay, now we can see more of what's going on. And you can tell that there's actually another character in the story. You guys see the other little bitty character in the story? What is it? It's by the door? It's a bee or some sort of flying insect, right? Maybe this, Layla, what do you see? Do you see the corn over there? Yeah, there's some corn, so maybe it is a farm. Now, we get some clues into the time period that this was going on, right? Because look at the light that they're using up at the top. What kind of light is that? It's a lantern. And when do you use lanterns? When you don't have what? Electricity. So maybe this is happening before there was electricity. If you look at their clothing, notice this, they're not hipsters, okay? This is probably not even America. I mean, this looks a little bit more like Holland or something, like something a long time ago. They're wearing some unique clothing. Now, show us the next picture. Maybe we'll get more. Okay, look. Now there's some other animals. There's some, pigs and some ducks and a horse and a cat. Maybe they're actually on a farm. Show us the other picture, the next picture. Oh, more of the farm. Oh, but we see a car there. So that's a truck. Now, it's an older truck, but it's likely that there was electricity, right? Because trucks came after electricity. I don't know if you remember your timeline, but that's kind of the way that it went. And show us one more picture out. Let's see. Uh-oh. This is a completely different story than I thought. There's a giant. Is this like Jack and the Beanstalk? Is that what's going on here? See, because we have wait, there's a little box there. Oh, so we thought the story was about these little kids and this rooster, but actually those are little toys that this person is playing with. Show us the next picture. Okay, so this person is playing with these toys on this, it looks like maybe in a toy story, because it says toys. Maybe it's a store that has toys. I'm not sure. Go to the next picture. Oh, uh-oh. See what they did there? That's actually a magazine. So it's not about this little girl that's playing with her toys. It's probably about this person that's holding the magazine and about their life. That's probably what the story's about. Let's see. Show us the next one. Okay, yeah, we got a person. And this person are they awake? Nope, they're asleep. So maybe this story's about this really tired person that got super tired from reading this toy magazine, which, man, I tell you what, I'd love to have a little toy magazine, especially if it's one of those highlight ones where you can find all the hidden pictures. I loved those. My favorite thing about the dentist office. All right, show us. I think we have one more. Okay. Oh, look, this person has lost their shoe. No, we have one more after this. And you see that, oh, look, they're actually on a boat. They're just on a ship that has a pool. See, as you begin to look back and you get more of what's in view, the story changes. Now, this is so important that we understand context matters. What we learned last week is that Jesus is the exact imprint of God's nature. He is the image of the invisible God. All of the fullness of God's deity dwelt in Jesus. So here's the thing. Here's what this means. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus, because Jesus is what God is like. Every other picture of God throughout Scripture is not an untrue picture. It's a true picture of God, but it's a small piece of God's character. It's a small piece of God's character. And it's important that we're able to step back and look at the entirety and to know where this fits in God's character. Because if you take a story out of context, like Noah, where it can seem like God is just mad and angry and just kind of flies off the handle and destroys all of humanity, we can get a wrong idea about God, right? But when we look at the context of all of Scripture, and you look at God and all of these pictures of God through the lens of Jesus, which is the full picture of God, it changes things. But also, when we look at the context of this story in all of Genesis, it will change things too. Now, how many of you have ever, done something wrong as a kid? Anyone ever as a kid did something wrong? Yeah? Okay, did your parents ever punish you when you did something wrong? Yeah, mine did too. Now here's the deal. Here's what can happen a lot of times. When I was a kid, my dad was the one who would discipline us when we did something wrong. And my dad is a good dad, loves us. He always disciplined us out of love. At least that's what he told us. But he cared for us, and that's why he would discipline us. But my dad, he's a good dad, but he's not perfect. He's human. And just like all of us, he has good days and he has bad days. And I remember as a kid, the line of what was okay changed based on whether you're having a good day or a bad day. So if your dad's in a good mood, you can kind of like step over the line just a little bit. You know what I'm talking about? There's kind of a little bit more leeway. And if you did something wrong on a good day, you might get some leniency in your punishment, right? But if it was a bad day, I remember when my dad was having a bad day, like I was a little bit nervous, and I was really careful to make sure that I wasn't going to break any rules, because on a bad day, things might go worse for me. Can anyone relate to that? Now, when you think about God as a father, I think a lot of times the only picture of father that I really have is my dad. And so sometimes I can get a misunderstanding of what God is like by looking at my dad. Sometimes I get a good picture of what God is like by looking at my dad, but sometimes I get a bad picture. And so when I think about when I was a kid and I would do something wrong, I was afraid. Not because my dad was mean, but because I didn't want to get punished. I didn't like being disciplined. Sometimes discipline hurts. And so I would be afraid of my dad. And if you read this story out of context, you can begin to get a misunderstanding of what God is like. And you can begin to be afraid of God. Has anyone ever been afraid of God? I mean, we just talked about how powerful he is a couple weeks ago, right? He spoke and the universe happened, right? He's all powerful and he's perfect and he's righteous and he's just. And you can begin to picture him as a judge with a gavel and be kind of nervous because I'm not righteous. But when you see this picture in the context of Scripture, I guarantee it's going to change. So I want to look at Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, we're going to look at the world. It says this, Genesis chapter 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So the picture you get when God creates the world is that there's kind of this formless mass of water that's really dark and deep. That's kind of all we have there, this formless mass of water that's really dark and deep. Now, God does something to it. Verse 6, and God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And so he made the sky, okay? So the sky and the air that we see, and there was water above and there was water below. So he began to form the world kind of as we see it now in that sentence. But he goes on. It says in verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters were gathered together, he called seas. So now, what we see is this formless void of water gets separated into two forms of water, and then the bottom form gets separated kind of into the world that we see now, where God pushes back the waters and allows the dry land to appear. So here's what I want to know. What is the natural state of the world in regards to water? The natural state is that it's covered with water. That's the natural, normal state. But what God did was he pushed back the waters, and he was holding back the waters to allow dry land to appear. Now, obviously, we're going to the second law of thermodynamics, right? Here's what the second law of thermodynamics says. It says a total change in entropy of a system plus its surroundings will always increase for a spontaneous process, obviously, right? And there's no questions about that, right? Now, here's how an MCAT test prep explained this from the Khan Academy. It says, every system wants to achieve a state of maximum disorder or randomness, meaning every system, so like the system we live in, the world, the earth, right? The movement that it desires is to move towards chaos, okay? Now get this, the natural state of the world was covered with water, and the desire of the water that had been pushed back was to come back to a state of disorder. Because as we all know, liquids are in a more state of disorder than solids, right? Because liquids can move, solids, or they stay, they're stationary. And so what we see is physically, the world wanted to return back to a state covered in water, okay? But that wasn't just physically, also spiritually. Remember Adam and Eve, they broke God's heart because they disobeyed God. And not only did they break their relationship with one another, but they broke their relationship with God, right? And they didn't just break their relationship with God, they broke their relationship with creation. And because of the sin, like everything went into disorder and chaos. Like you have natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, all kind of stuff going on that isn't the way that God created it to be. And there was this spiritual thing that happened. Sin entered into the world. And so not only did the world tend towards chaos physically, like according to the second law of thermodynamics, but also spiritually. When sin entered into the world, it was like this disease that began to corrupt everything. And so the movement of the world spiritually was into chaos and disorder. And for 10 generations, God waited patiently as things got worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, here's the thing. If you've ever heard of God's wrath, what do you tend to think of? Probably God getting mad and striking someone with lightning. That's basically what I think of when I think of God's wrath, right? God's mad, God's angry, and he strikes someone down with lightning. But you know what? That's not really the wrath of God. Paul clearly defines the wrath of God in Romans chapter 1. So I want to look at this, and bear with me. If we hold all these pieces together, it's really going to make a beautiful picture of what God is like. Romans chapter 1:18 says this, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men," or of humanity. Now, really quick, is the wrath of God against humanity, or is the wrath of God against the unrighteousness of humanity? It's key, it's huge, because we can think that God is mad at humanity and wants to punish humanity, but that's not what Paul says. Paul says God's wrath is against the unrighteousness, it's against the evil, it's against the harm and the hurt that we cause, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Now here's what his wrath does, verse 24. "Therefore God gave them up," this is humanity, "gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves." Verse 26. "For this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions." Verse 28. "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done." You see, the wrath of God is not God actively striking people with lightning who do something that he doesn't like. The wrath of God is this. It's God saying, if you want to do things your way, I'm going to let you do things your way and allow you to experience the natural byproduct of your sin. I'm going to allow you to experience the natural consequences of your sin, because I know it can seem like doing things that are bad is fun. Sometimes it seems like doing things that are wrong is fun. But what God knows more than we know is that what we do that is not in line with his will, his good, beautiful, and perfect will, is actually bad for us, because sin will destroy us, sin will enslave us, sin will corrupt us and utterly destroy us. That's what sin does. And the wrath of God is not striking us down when we do something wrong. The wrath of God is saying, if you want to do what you want to do, I'm actually going to let you do it. And you're going to experience the full consequences of your action. That's the wrath of God. But here's the beauty of what we see in the picture of Genesis chapter 6, is that the natural state of the world physically was covered with water. And the natural state of the world under the corruption of sin was to move into disorder and chaos. And the disorder and chaos, the way that the Jewish people would have seen this, was a world covered in water. The way that they looked at the sea, now Jewish people, they weren't seafaring people. And I don't know how many of you like the sea or the ocean. If you've ever been on the ocean, it's really powerful. Right? If you've ever been like surfing or just even in the ocean with the waves, waves are really powerful. Right? So imagine you're not like a water person and you're near the sea and you see the power of the water and you're like, whoa, this is powerful. And what the power of the water causes is chaos during storms, right? It tips over boats and it destroys things that are built on the land and it does all this erosion, right? And so their view was that the waters were evil. The waters were chaos. The waters were anti-creation. And so what we see in the picture of Genesis chapter 6 is God has been abundantly patient with the rebellion of humanity for 10 generations. In fact, so much that he has been holding back the waters, not allowing the waters to come and cover the earth, which is what they wanted to do, and even not allowing the fullness of sin to destroy humanity. Even the consequences that they experienced was a part of the grace of God, not allowing the fullness of them to experience it. So even though they deserved it, even though the intentions of the thoughts of their heart was evil continuously, God was graciously not allowing them to experience the full consequences of their sin, because that's what God is like. And then God said, okay, enough is enough. If you want to continually rebel, if you want to continually run away from me, I'm going to allow you to see what happens. I'm going to remove my hedge of protection. I'm going to remove my hands from holding back the waters and allow sin to do what sin does. Allow evil to do what evil does. And he allowed the water to cover the earth again. And even in that, God was gracious because he said, I'm going to save humanity. And I'm going to choose one guy. I'm going to choose him to save his family. And through his family, save all of creation with all of the animals on the boat. Because that's what our God is like. Now, we're talking about all this because we want to show how all of this points to Jesus. So when you look at this story and you think about Jesus, who in this story is like Jesus? Who do you think? Anyone? Rhymes with Noah. Anyone? Noah, yeah, that's exactly right. Noah, everybody, wow, so many people talking in church. That's amazing. Okay, yeah, Noah, right? You think about Noah, it says Noah was righteous in God's sight. Was Jesus righteous? Yeah, and Noah saved his family and through the boat saved all of creation. Did Jesus save all of creation and save humanity? Yeah, so if you look at this story and imagine you're sitting with Jesus and all of his disciples, right? You're sitting at his feet and he's going through the books, right? He just talked about Adam and Eve, he talked about Cain and Abel, and he talked about the Tower of Babel. Now he's on to the story of Noah. And he's like, hey, I want to show you how this points to me. One of the things that he would have said, I'm imagining, is that, hey, when you look at Noah and you look at the way that God the Father worked through Noah, that's a picture of me. And a picture of how I am righteous, and a picture of how I saved the world through my death and resurrection. But there's more than this, because it's not just that Noah is a picture of Jesus. Do you know who else is a picture of Jesus in this story? The evil people on the earth that were destroyed. Now, I've never thought about it this way before until I was really chewing on it the past few weeks, which seems odd. Like, how in the world could the evil people that got destroyed by the flood, how could they be a picture of Jesus, right? Did Jesus ever do anything bad? No, never, ever, ever. Did Jesus disobey ever? Never. Jesus never disobeyed. He always did what was right. He always did what was good, what was beautiful, what was beneficial, always, every time. So how could the people that were evil that got destroyed by the flood be a picture of Jesus? See, last week we looked at it. said, God made him, Jesus, to be sin who knew no sin so that we might become the righteousness of Christ. Jesus, although he is perfect, he allowed all of sin to be taken on himself. All of the evil things humanity has ever done to be put upon his shoulders spiritually. And he got up on the cross and then he took the wrath of God. I don't know about you, but I love movies where people make like this incredible escape, like at the last minute, where like some sort of disaster is coming and just in the last minute they escape. And you think, oh, yes, whew, right? Because I like to escape things. I like to take the easy way out. I don't like when things are hard or difficult. I like to get out of trouble. And so when I look at the story of Noah, I'm like, yeah, I want to be in the boat like Noah. I want to escape the evil that's coming after humanity. But what God did in Jesus was he said, I'm not going to escape the full consequences of sin. In fact, I'm going to stay here on the earth and I'm going to take the full weight of sin, the full consequences of sin that I don't deserve, that you deserve. But because I love you, I'm not going to escape. I'm not going to dodge the bullet. I'm going to step in front of the bullet. I'm going to step in front of the consequences of sin and take all of them so that you can be righteous, so that you can be free, so that you can have life abundantly, life eternally, so that you can be a part of my family. That's what Jesus did. You can see this in the temptation narrative when Jesus is getting tempted by Satan. So Jesus is in the wilderness, right? He's just in the middle of nowhere, and he's super hungry because he's been fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. And then the enemy, the devil, comes to him, and here's what it says. It says, again, the devil took him, Jesus, to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, I will give, he says, all of these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. And then Jesus said to him, be gone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. See, the temptation for Jesus here is to take the easy way out. Jesus knew that his path was through the cross. He knew that his path had to go through suffering and death. And in his humanity, he didn't want to do that because it was going to hurt, because it was going to be hard, because it was going to be suffering like we can't imagine. And Satan was giving him a ticket, an easy ticket out. He said, I'm going to give you glory. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the earth, just like God promised you. But all you have to do for me is just worship me. You don't have to go through the cross. You don't have to go through the torture. You don't have to go through the suffering. You don't have to go through the pain. But Jesus, because of his extravagant love for us, said, I'm going to go through the difficulty. I'm going to go through the pain. I'm going to go through the suffering so that you can be the righteousness that I deserve, so that you can have life, so that you can be in my family. Jesus didn't take the easy way out. And I love the story of Noah for a number of reasons. The first thing the story of Noah shows me is that God is patient. He waited 10 generations at least to not allow humanity to experience the natural consequences of their sin. God is patient with us over and over and over. Secondly, God is against evil, not humanity. God is against evil, not humanity. He's not against us, he's against evil. And he's even patient with our evil choices. Thirdly, he is graciously holding back the consequences of sin. Even when we look at the world and all the corrupt things that are going on, this is still just a glimpse of the fullness of what should happen. This is still God holding back the consequences. God in his grace is not even allowing us to experience the full consequences of our sin, even in our world, even in the natural disasters, even in disease. We still only experience a small portion of it because God is gracious. And the fourth thing that I love about the story of Noah is that it points to the beautiful character of God in God staying on the earth, not escaping in the boat, to take on the full weight of sin so that we can have life. And he did that in Jesus. This is a beautiful picture of the patient, loving, gracious, and compassionate character of God, who's not gonna just allow evil to just sweep it under the rug. He's gonna take care of evil once and for all, but he did it in such a way that we didn't have to suffer and die. He did it in such a way that we could have life, and it cost him everything. This is why I love God. It's why my heart is filled with his praise, why I want to sing his praise, because he's the one that made the way so that I can have life and you can have life and I can have family and we can have eternity and death won't have the final say on my life. What an amazing God we serve.